Sounds particularly fearful when it's said with an American accent. Jean Howard is next on my screen. Jean.
Hello, everybody. I'm a parish councillor in Street. We have some reasonably good bus services, but as with everywhere, their frequency has been reduced over time. They don't link up to the major hubs for rail networks. The only good bus service, the only really reliable service we've got is the 376, which is, I believe, the most used bus service in Somerset, and that links Street all the way up to Bristol. So it is a very, very, very important bus route, and it does run still through the evenings. But for people in Street, they can't go to Taunton on a Sunday. You can't get back from Taunton, the county town, after about 5:30 at night. So, you know, people are cut off. The people who are most affected by it, I believe, apart from older residents, are women, and women who are in caring positions who have to get from A to B. I used to live in London nearly 20 years ago, and what has struck me is the disparity in funding between what there is spent per head of the population in London at approximately £6.50 per person, compared to us in Somerset who get £1.50. So I think if we're going to do anything, I personally would be saying the government has got a responsibility, or said their aim is to level up. The way they can help level up Somerset is to give us parity of funding so we can have proper bus services 7 days a week, morning, afternoons and evenings, to help the elderly, women, young people actually go about their lives and get employment, because that is the key thing for youngsters. If you can't go to Taunton on a Sunday, you can't get a job in Taunton on Sunday. You can't get a job in the evening. And I think, you know, that's basically where I'm coming from. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. And that says an awful lot, Gina. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
David Redwell, person I know very well, and anyone connected with buses will know David very, very well. Are you there, David? Are you able to just briefly introduce yourself to those who don't know you?
I'm David Redwell. For tonight's purposes, I'm representing the Bristol Transport Board and the West of England Mayor. Did work for both of them. The issue with Mendip is a bit unique compared with the rest of Somerset, as your previous speaker said. That majority of the evening and Sunday services are in fact funded or provided by the West of England Combined Authority or North Somerset Council. So that's why there's evening services in this part of Somerset. It's because the network is effectively funded jointly, and that goes forward with the bus service improvement plan. So what we need to make sure in this area, and with Mendip District Council, which of course will be Mendip Area Board of the Somerset Council, will be working very closely together with Dan Norris, the Mayor of the West of England, and the West of England Combined Authority and North Somerset Council on their bus service improvement plan, because without that joint working, Mendip will not get the funding, and that applies to Councillor Ham's situation as well, because obviously his bus starts in Radstock and finishes in Frome, and there's a number of them do that, and of course including the D2, the famous bus we saved. It wasn't called that in that term, it's called 276. That required both authorities to come together and make sure the funding. So I'm just here tonight to make sure that we have a good working relationship, I think, across the border. And for those that are interested, the Mayor of the West of England is meeting on the 17th of December at 12 o'clock at Midsummer Norton Town Hall. And providing you give 3 days notice, any parish council in the area on the joint routes, where it's a joint route, where it's run jointly between Somerset and Dan Norris, the Mayor of the West of England, like 376, then I think there's a chance you can come along and speak and have your say. And I would encourage Philip, if he wishes to, and his colleagues in Colford, to come and meet the Mayor of the West of England and put the case for a joint funding. I think that would be very helpful, Philip. So I make that point tonight, and there's 2 consultations out I want to mention by the Mayor today. One you'll be very pleased to know is upgrading the buses on the 376 route, and that is from along the A37. That is a joint study, by the way, supported by Somerset County Council to upgrade that route. And they want a 15-minute service between them, Dan Norris and John Woodman. We'll see if that happens. And the other one is on the other route is the 367, which is the Wells, Shepton Mallet, Polton, so I get this right, Midsummer, Norton, Peasdown, St John and Radstock into Bath. And those routes are looking at all the infrastructure on and the service levels. And of course, those services don't terminate in West Riding Combined Authority, but run into Somerset. So they're online, they're on the West Riding Combined Authority website, but I'm sure that Somerset Bus Partnership will put those in the chat for you later on, and to make sure you all have your say, especially Street Council, Wells Council and Glastonbury Council. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Michael Gay. You need to unmute yourself, Michael.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thanks. I'm actually going to let Andrea speak first, and then I'll introduce myself afterwards.
My name's Andrea Dexter. I'm a Wanstow Parish Councillor. I've lived in Wanstow now for 6 years. When I arrived, I couldn't believe that we didn't have a bus service at all, because we're on the A359 between Nunney and Bruton. We do have a bus service to take children to school and bring them back in term times, but it's not accessible to the public. I've been listening to people saying that they want their bus services improved or maintained. As I understood the announcement by Mr. Johnson, he pledged to bring up new bus routes to rural locations. We're not a remote rural location. We're a bang smack in the middle of a main road rural location, and we have no bus at all. So I'm very much looking forward to a bus service, and I'm very keen that whatever monies we get are ring-fenced for provision not only of existing routes, but of new routes to isolated communities who have no other transport options but the private car. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Michael.
Hi. Some people will know me of old. I'm a Wanstow Parish Councillor, and I'm also the District Councillor for the Postlebury area, which is basically the villages southwest of Frome. We did try and run a bus service subsidised by parishes, but I'm afraid the county mechanism for subsidy saw that off. But that was our reaction to try and do something rather than nothing. As Andrea says, buses are things that school children get to enjoy briefly, but not in the evenings when they'd be very helpful. And in discussion at Frome with regards to the draft local community network, we did discuss the fact that the lack of bus services means that our young people don't have the opportunity to visit various venues, apart from if they're driven there by mum or dad. And I was horrified at the suggestion from a county officer that we should do another bus survey. They seemed oblivious to the Somerset Bus Partnership workflow, and I soon disabused them of that, and I'm afraid I named Peter Travis as the guilty party. I'd very much like to see some buses in my district ward. I think the last time Wanstow saw a public service bus was well over a decade ago, but at least cheerfully we still get bus passes delivered to our elderly in a sort of satirical way. So any improvement would be very much appreciated, and I'm not chiefly thinking of improvements, yet more improvements to Taunton bus services. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Maria, you're muted at the moment. There we are.
Right. So my name is Maria Komonika. I live in Shepton Mallet. I'm a bus user. I don't drive, so I completely rely on buses to get to work and for leisure as well. So at the moment, buses in Shepton are slightly better Monday to Friday, as we have this additional 174, a local service.
Mm.
But still, on Saturday, I'm struggling to get to work for 9 o'clock in Wells, because the first bus is leaving Shepton around 9 o'clock. So unless I got a lift, I'm usually 20 minutes late. And it's the same situation for all the kids who are living in Wales, living in Shepton and working in Wales as a weekend staff. They have to make an arrangements to start later rather than 9 o'clock. And the other problem is there is no buses to Shepton after 6 o'clock. So if you don't catch the last bus, you either have to walk this 5 miles or catch a taxi.
Mm.
So that's not ideal. And there is a lot of Shepton people working in Wales who are using cars because the bus service is not really reliable. Yeah, so.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, it's a real issue. Perhaps we will talk about it later on in the meeting, but it's a real issue that the lack of bus services is meaning that a lot of young people, the 18 to 25-year-olds, who perhaps not established themselves fully in the workplace, but are having often to work 5-6 days a week, they're having to move out of the villages. And if you look at the age profile of people in small country villages, there is a deficiency in that age group because they've been forced out. Glenn Burrows.
Oh, thank you, Peter. I'm a town councillor in Bridgwater, and as Peter says, one of the co-chairs of the Somerset Bus Partnership. I hold the transport portfolio on Bridgwater Town Council. Never ever had a car and never wanted one. So having been I used to work on the railways, a lifelong bus user and rail user. In a way, I'm kind of delighted that we've come to a point in our history where people have now got to face reality and realize that, you know, our future lies in a well-developed public transport system. And it's something that I'm really proud to be working with the Somerset Bus Partnership on. And it's so wonderful to see so many people who are clearly driven by the same sort of passion. So I'm here to listen tonight. I have, as Peter says, we've had our meeting already this week, but it is really impressive to see all of you and a great privilege to hear your experiences. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Glenn. John Harvey.
Hi, John Harvey. I'm the chair of Walton Parish Council. Only things I would add to Jean's assessment of the bus availability from Street to Taunton is that my daughter, as it happens, goes to college in Taunton, and so does several of her friends. So I am the bus quite often. And of course, you know, from a social perspective, clearly it's ludicrous that there's no way of getting from somewhere as large as Street or Glastonbury to the county town of Somerset at any time other than between 9 to 5 on a working day. It's just an appalling situation. The other thing, of course, is that Walton is slap bang on the A39, and that is one busy road. And clearly, the more we can do to take traffic off it, the better.
Thank you, John. Ken James.
I'm a parish councillor in Rodney Stoke. I was foolish enough to volunteer to find somebody who knew what a bus was, because it appears that there are no bus users on the parish council at all. So I caught one of my near neighbours off guard, and he's Robin Dyes, who's looking very pensive on the screen, and he's into trains, automobiles, buses, and any other form of transport. And he will be hopefully representing Rodney Stoke Parish Council on this community. And I will be either bowing out or just keeping an eye on him to make sure that he behaves.
I hope you stay on and make sure that he behaves, but let's give him an opportunity. Robin, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Hello. I didn't know what I was in for till yesterday when Ken actually pushed me into the job. So I'm a complete novice. I'm an occasional user of the bus. Rodney Stoke, it's the Wells Western bus. They run roughly hourly. The evening services and the weekends aren't particularly good. And there's roughly 200 villages as a catchment area. I don't know what else to say to you, except that when I used the bus, I've been fairly happy with it.
Thank you.
Full stop.
Moving on to someone I know very well. She's my district councillor, Barbie Land.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm district parish councillor for Norton St Philip, Green Party district councillor for Roden, Norton St Philip, northeast of Mendip. I'm sure most of you will know where we are. And I really agree with so much of what everybody said in terms of, the need for public transport for so many people who don't have access to cars or who don't want to drive cars, the frequency, all of that. And then you probably won't be surprised, given that I'm a Green Party councillor, that one of my main concerns is also the fact that we have a climate emergency. The government's made a commitment to be net zero by 2050, and we haven't got a hope in hell of getting there unless we have a joined up public transport system. So yes, we need buses. And we need buses, particularly in rural areas. Norton St Philip is quite well served, Road much less so, and boy, don't we all need them. So that's me.
Thank you, Barbie. The next person I'm going to call is Roger James. Roger, you and I have had email exchanges, and I think probably later on in the meeting we'll come back to the topic, but you might like to just say what that topic is. At the moment, you're muted. I can't actually see you. Perhaps you've disappeared off to have a cup of tea somewhere. Are you there, Roger? No, we'll come back to Roger. Someone joining us from afar is Lee Fletcher. He's joining us from France, but he's been very involved as an advisor to the Somerset Bus Partnership. Lee, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name's Lee Fletcher. Sorry, I'm not actually showing myself in person, but I'm on a tablet tonight, and it's got an absolutely dire camera, so you wouldn't be able to see me anyway. But I am here. I'm currently coordinator for Option 24/7, which is the Wiltshire-wide bus user group. We're currently doing much as you're attempting to do in Somerset with Wiltshire Council, acting as a bridge between passengers, the bus operators, and the council regarding the bus service improvement plan. And now we're moving on to the enhanced partnership plan phase of Bus Back Better. We've got a similar structure to the one that you're trying to put in place in terms of reps. So obviously I've been advising Somerset Bus Partnership on that as well. So I'm really here to see how you're getting along with that, and if I can help in any way I will.
Thank you very much, Lee. Both Lee and David Redgewell have been providing a lot of help and guidance to the Somerset Bus Partnership. As Lee said, option 24/7 in Wiltshire is very much a model that we're trying to emulate here in Somerset with the Somerset Bus Partnership. Moving on to leading figures, the next one is Brownie. Brownie, would you like to introduce yourself to those who don't know?
Peter. Thank you. A wonderful room full of passion. I'm just trying to remember quite what the question was, and I think it was, why does one spend yet another hour of the day working on public transport? And it is quite simply because I believe that the heart of making a success of public transport, and it matters, and I'll go through why, is because the passenger needs to be central, and the passenger needs to be central, and the way to find that out is to ask the passenger. And so the more informed you are about strategy and I suppose aspiration amongst councillors and politicians, the better we're able to angle for good services for passengers. So why should the passenger be at the heart? Well, because public transport gives connectivity, which enables so much for communities, and Somerset and the Mendips particularly have scored really badly in terms of life opportunity, and I think there's no denying a lot of that is down to poor access to public transport and isolation, and that's a flag we must really carry forward with all campaigning. In doing that, we need to be projecting I passionately believe the service must be competitive, providing competitive alternatives to the car. And when you do that, as you've already alluded to, this means services that are more reliable, that run for longer times, and buses are fantastic for their flexibility, our ability to reroute and change things. But all the time, to do that, you need to keep talking to the passenger. So, accessible, reliable, well-round, sort of whole well-routed service is really important. There is a massive funding disparity between rural areas and what are called peripheries and some of our urban centres, and that is something we must fight for. Having spoken so much, I'm really here to listen to you and to see how I can help take things forward. Travel Watch Southwest, for those of you that don't know, we cover everywhere from Wiltshire to Gloucester, down through Somerset, Devon, Dorset, down to the Isles of Scilly. And I've been really fortunate, and I was sort of tasked with taking the DFT around different parts of the country, showing them where the snags lay for rural travel. And I myself gave up my car this year, and I live in a very rural part of mid-Devon, and my God, it's a struggle. Anyway, there you are.
Thank you very much, Brandy. Thank you, that's brilliant. Jan, you're muted at the moment. Jan, you're a lady. I don't know you personally. You're wearing a blue top and a red sweater underneath it. She's gone. There you are. No. Okay, I'll come back to Jan. Jevon, if you unmute yourself and tell us where you're from and
There you go.
Jevon?
I think Jevon is on a bus, so I think he might be quite noisy.
Okay, all right, we'll move on.
Yes, I am. I'm on
you are.
service Y6 at the moment. Just heading westbound from Yate to Malcripps Causeway on a great big tour today. I've done a 376 to Wells, which got diverted at Farrington, Gurney due to a 2-car, 1-lorried vehicular accident via the A362, B3355 and the B3139, and then I did a 173 all the way up to Bath. Then I swapped onto a 620 up to Yate, and now I'm on a Y6 westbound across to Malcripps Causeway. And then I'll be doing a 3 or a 4, hopefully, provided there are no stupidities in the Henbury suburb of Bristol, South Gloucestershire boundaries. And then back home later and finishing around 20 past midnight. And I do quite a lot of these tours day by day. Just for those that are not aware that I don't face cover due to epileptics, which is why I've got the sunflower lanyard on. So I can't mask. Should I epileptic fit, suffocate people, not recognise what I do, and then consequential actions resulting in badness in a saloon, say, paramedics unexpectedly being called. Yeah, so I travel around the country in different areas. I recently did Derby, where else? Nottingham as well. I've been sampling a little of. I took a little ride on the Red Arrow, which is quite an interesting one, which doesn't accept concessions, on a nice trip eastbound, and they've got nice high back seated coaching. There is a chap I found out who does similarities to me called Alex up in Sheffield. He takes rides on different saloons, gives little demonstrations on like USB portings, goodness of vehicles. Like they recently upgraded a vehicle in Sheffield for X78. For those who don't know the X78, that uses double deckers and single deckers, all the way from Sheffield out through Rotherham, right the way to Doncaster. And they just upgraded with a nice posh decker revamp of tabling as well as reverse chairing.
Jevon,
I
thank
can't
you.
believe.
Jevon, we'll have to move on, but thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Roger, are you ready to go? Roger?
Yeah, I had to switch to my tablet. I couldn't get on my computer. I can now.
Right.
Hi, Peter. Yeah, my name is Roger James. I live in Ditchit, and I'm a parish councillor in Ditchit Parish. And I got into this in a slightly odd way because we have a #1 bus that comes through our village, which comes through from Shepton down towards Castle Carey and beyond. And the bus is supposed to go to the station. It doesn't actually stop there. It just, you can actually make a request stop if you're lucky, or you can stand by the side of a dangerous road and wave it down to get a bus. So I got involved in that because I thought it was outrageous. The bus never actually stopped at the station. And also it's progressed on from there, is that trying to do some work with the station really to make that turn out into a proper transport hub, that we actually get a bus to stop there in the first place, have an improved timetable to it, but also get the station more integrated into the bus community, if you like. So quite a bit of work to do that, and also connecting with Wells, because the bus needs to connect to Wells really. And it seems mad to me that we have quite a viable station very close to here, but you can't get at it very easily unless you've got a car. And at the moment, even if you've got a car, you can't park there because there's not enough parking room for it. So you have a station that actually could do a lot more service than it is doing, but it's semi-redundant in many ways. But the whole thing needs rejigging. It's the pedestrians, the cars, possibly a bus might go there one day. Everything gets mixed up. The whole place just needs redesigning to be a proper transport hub. So that's what I've been pushing at.
Thank you, Roger. And it's something that the Somerset Bus Partnership wants to take up. I've had meetings with people from St Cuthbert, Souter and Wells who are very, very keen to establish a bus link through to Castle Carey. It has the potential to be a really useful mainline link. It's entirely in line with everything that Bus Better has been advocating. We just need to pioneer some new services there, and it's one of the projects that we want to work on with Roger going forward. Daniel, are you with us, Daniel?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Dan Litchfield.
Everybody saying their own.
Sorry, we probably a good idea to switch off microphones when we're not.
If we can mute everyone.
No.
if you're not talking,
like I say, the couple meetings now, I think we've just gone running because everybody's saying the same things all the time.
I've just muted everyone. Daniel, can you unmute yourself and have another go? Sorry.
Thanks very much. Sorry about that. Yes, I'll probably say the same as everybody else too. I'm from Upton Noble, which you probably never heard of. It's the next village to Wanstro, where we've heard already from Andrea and Michael, and of course we share the same challenges that they have. That's to say, we've got no bus service at all. Haven't had one for a very long time. But there is a sense in the village that people would use buses if there were a service. And it's perfectly obvious that you're never going to get us out of our cars for the good of the environment unless there is one. So I think, we're interested in principle and interested to know what's going on this group and what we can do to help. But obviously we've got a very, very long way to go.
Thank you very much. And Jessica, are you with us, Jessica? You would need to unmute yourself. You have done. Great.
Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Jessica.
Brilliant. I'm using headphones, so I wasn't sure. I would probably repeat a lot of what's already been said, but I will add to it. I'm with Ashwick Parish Council, and we are right on the route 174 between Bath and Wells. Comes once an hour. Maria's pointed out that it's not good enough in the mornings, but it's also not good enough in the evenings. The last bus, I believe, leaves Bath around 7 in the evening, and then the last one leaves Wells at about 5 in the evening. So you really don't have any sort of evening time to go anywhere. And the same goes for weekends. It's very limited. So if you want to leave the village, you really don't have much choice unless you drive. I've spoken to residents here, and the consensus seems to be that in order to get people out of their cars, we need buses to be accessible, clean, affordable, reliable, and frequent. Those are all the things people have brought up to me. And to add to this, I am totally blind. I have a guide dog and I have a 13-year-old daughter. My husband works away a lot, so I do use the bus a lot. Take my daughter to the dentist, to, well, that's in Shepton, and then in the optician in Wells. School is in Midsummer Norton, so we're back and forth quite a bit on the 174. And I would really, really like to push for all the buses to be just as accessible as they are when I visit London. When I go to London, I hate the hustle and bustle, but I absolutely love the public transport when I'm there. It makes life so easy to get around if you cannot drive. And we are so lacking here in Somerset. It's quite depressing sometimes. If you miss that one bus, you have to wait another hour. And I know that there's people in worse situations, but so much more can be done. And to add to that also, we are just off the A37 and we have no direct buses to Bristol. So if you want to work in Bristol or visit Bristol, you've got to go half an hour out the way to Wells and wait for the 376, or you have to go to Bath for an hour and then swap to another bus that takes you across to Bristol. So it's a huge trip just to get to Bristol, which would take you 40 minutes in the car. So again, very, very limited options.
Thank you very much, Jessica. I think that really points to the big challenge to get people out of their cars and onto public transport. There is a lot of interest in making that move, but unfortunately buses are too often too inconvenient to make that an option for people. And that's what we've got to try and encourage to change. What I'm now going to do is screen share and take you through a presentation that we put together in the Somerset Bus Partnership, talking about Mendip. It's been mentioned already about the problems of moving around Mendip by bus. In many ways, it's easier to move out of Mendip than it is moving around Mendip, or even within Mendip down to the county town. In fact, from where I am, which is a village just outside of Frome, there are no bus connections. Rail connections are almost impossible. And so our county councillors, the only way they can get to Taunton is by car. But when we then look at the powerhouses of Bristol and Bath, and also just over the border from us in this part of Mendip, we've got Trowbridge. We've got very, very important cross-border links, and David Redgewell's already alluded to this, and Lee Fletcher is very aware of the link, particularly from Frome into Trowbridge and beyond into Wiltshire. The best bus services we have are in fact cross-border. They tend to run more frequently. They have a better chance of running into the evenings and at weekends. I guess to a significant extent, that's because of the attitudes of those local transport authorities over the border. Moving on, there we are. So let me just tell you the story of the bus services that we've got at the moment, and most of this will be fitting into the stories that you've told. Our track record on buses is in fact one of the worst in the country. That's largely because of the rural nature of Somerset, which makes it difficult to run commercially viable bus services. But a lot of rural counties do better than we do here in Somerset. The period of austerity in 2010 saw a huge reduction in central government funding of Somerset, and they had to make cuts. And one of the targets for cuts was the funding of buses. We saw evening buses unfunded in Somerset, and we saw most weekend services defunded in Somerset. The consequence of that is, as we've heard, if you've got a job and your job requires you to work a bit later than 5 o'clock at night, 6, 7, 8 or 9 or 10 o'clock at night, if there isn't a bus to get you home, you're not going to take a bus to get you to work. And so the consequence of those limited bus cuts has resulted in a 43% drop in bus journeys per head in Somerset in the decade leading up to the start of COVID. COVID obviously gave another kick where it really hurts in terms of bus usage as a consequence. The fall in Somerset is just about the steepest decline in the whole country. Journeys per head in Somerset are lower than in our neighbouring counties like Wiltshire, like Devon, like Somerset. Somerset's story is not a good one. And it gets worse. It's not just against our neighbouring counties. When you look at the number of journeys per head in the whole of the country, Somerset is the second worst in the country, the second lowest in the country. But we are in fact the lowest in terms of satisfaction scores. This is research done independently and is fully acknowledged by Somerset in the BSIP that the excellent BSIP that they put together. They're aware of the problems, like everyone who tries to use a bus is aware of the problems. The lowest satisfaction of any local transport authority in the country. And if that wasn't tough enough, that was when we came into COVID. Now bus operators are having to deal with COVID. We're all having to deal with COVID. Bus passenger numbers are not recovering as quickly as everyone hoped, the government had hoped. They're still only at about 70% of the pre-COVID numbers, and that was before we got the Omicron virus coming onto the scene. There's a shortage of HGV drivers. A lot of bus drivers have been tempted away from driving buses through all sorts of financial inducements to go and drive trucks. And a lot of bus companies, all bus companies, in fact, are desperately seeking more drivers. On top of that, for the bus operator, we've seen escalating fuel prices. And because a lot of people have moved from driving cars during the COVID epidemic to have moved from going by bus to driving cars during the COVID epidemic, on top of everything else, we've got increased traffic congestion. But let's look at the good news. We have a Prime Minister who is very genuine in what he says when he says he loves buses. This Prime Minister has driven a bus program and is the real strong backer of Bus Back Better. Boris believes in buses, and he really does. We saw that up at COP26. He had all the leaders of the world being chauffeured around on London double-decker buses. And in March of this year, Bus Back Better came out, which heralded a whole new future, a much brighter future for buses. As soon as it came out, we decided, a number of bus campaigners and bus users and councillors across Somerset decided we needed to have a voice for Somerset during the consultations which were going to take place by the county authority. We needed to try and give some coordination, some strength, some amplification to those local voices. And so we formed the Somerset Bus Partnership as a lobbying group to try and influence the thinking on Somerset's part in terms of what would be the best way forward for buses in Somerset. Yes, there are a lot of experts at Taunton, but the experts in Taunton aren't the only people who know about buses. The people who really know most about buses are the bus users and indeed the bus operators and the bus drivers. So we wanted to give a voice to councillors across the county and to bus users across the county. That is what Somerset Bus Partnership sets out to do. And given that we only started in March of this year, we now have 100 local area representatives, which is, I think everyone would accept, I hope, a remarkable growth. I'm told there are 300 or 400 parish councils, so we've still got some way to go. But there are a few organisations in Somerset which have got as many as 100 local councils, parishes, or local bus groups represented. So we think we deserve to have a strong voice. And so does Somerset. In fairness to them, they've invited us to be part of the Bus Advisory Board and the bus user and stakeholder group. The level of consultation, yes, they have been meetings, but the level of consultation partly driven by the fact that the BSIP and also the Enhanced Partnership are being driven at a phenomenal rate of knots by any normal local government standard. The consultation has been limited, but we've had a lot of communications with the team down at Taunton, we have tried to encourage them to listen, and I think they've recognised that we do represent a lot of bus users and local councils across Somerset. The aims of the bus partnership is to encourage the use of your local buses. Every bus operator will tell you, use it or lose it, and we agree with them. We have to get more people to use the bus services we've got, and we have to improve the bus services so that more people can use them. So it's a twin action there. And we are campaigning. We're campaigning for proper funding of buses in Somerset. And we want to do that with all the political parties. This is not a party political issue. We want to get all the political parties in Somerset on side with recognising the need for that. So for the last 6 months, Somerset, with the help of a really top-rate international transport consultancy, WSP, have put together a very impressive bus service improvement plan as required by the Bus Back Better programme. They've actually produced a 180-page document. It's full of really useful data about Somerset and lots of proposals for how to improve our buses. That document has now been sent to the Department for Transport. It went off at the end of October. And the next stage, which Somerset has already embarked upon, is the enhanced partnership. They have to embark on it now because it has to be in operation by the beginning of April, which, given as most of you will be well aware, being interested in buses are about endless, intricate detail. It is an extraordinary challenge to do all this work by the beginning of April. That's why they needed consultants to help them, why they've staffed up in Taunton to do it, and why we keep on bending their ear about what they should be doing. What they say is that the Somerset County Council BSIP, the Bus Service Improvement Plan, is an ambitious plan. And boy, it really is a very ambitious plan. They're focused on revitalizing the local bus network, halting and reversing the decline in local bus passenger use. So they're recognizing the problems that they've got very openly to support our climate emergency strategy and to meet the aspirations of key stakeholders. And most importantly, to make Somerset as a centre of excellence for rural transport. Or given at the moment it's bottom of the pecking order, that just indicates the seriousness, the commitment, and the vision that Somerset has put forward. And we, as the Somerset Bus Partnership, are absolutely with them on that. We've written to lots of people, but probably most significantly, we've written to Boris and told him that the Somerset BSIP should be backed by the Department of Transport. We've written to the Department of Transport, just had a reply actually today, acknowledging our comments, saying Somerset deserves more than most authorities, if not ahead of all other authorities, given the current state of buses, to be treated as a prime case for investment through the Bus Back Better money. And we've written to each of our MPs saying, back this Somerset BSIP. It really needs to have the very active support of our Somerset MPs, because we know darn well that those red wall Tory MPs up north will be saying the money should be going to the northern constituencies, but it's our bus service in Somerset, which is the second worst in the country and the one with the lowest satisfaction score, which deserves a large chunk, a very generous settlement. And so we're backing that Somerset BSIP. They say it's ambitious, we say it's ambitious. Hang on to your seats, it is ambitious because we're asking for £165 million over the next 4 years to support our buses in Somerset. It is a eye-watering sum of money, but it indicates just how much it is going to cost to get bus services in Somerset up to the standard that Bus Better says they should be at. Of course, asking for 165 million to go to Somerset is going to challenge the amount of money which is available. The FT ran a story last week saying that there's probably £2.2 billion of funding available for those BSIPs. Well, we're asking for about 12% of that. There are 80 other local transport authorities. It just indicates the scale and the need in Somerset's BSIP. When will we know how much we get? Well, we hope to get it all, don't we? And we should be asking for it all. But if there is going to be a settlement, we need to know it as soon as possible. We're not sure when that settlement is going to be advised to the Somerset County Council team, but the sooner the better, because they've got to be committing that money so that it can be operating by April the 1st. What is something that does concern us in the Somerset Bus Partnership is that the very charismatic leader of Somerset County Council, David Fothergill, has so far said that all the policies and deliverables set out within the BSIP are subject to additional funding being provided. And he spelled it out to me quite specifically. He said that Somerset is not going to increase its funding of buses in year 22-23. One of our campaign objectives is to try and change that point of view, because we think it really does need changing, and I think most of the people on the call would confirm that. We've looked at our neighbouring authorities. First of all, Somerset is spending less than £3 million at the moment. Well, it was in 2018-19, which were the latest figures we can get the comparative data, and it's not changed significantly since then. We're asking for £165 million from the government, and we're only spending £3 million, under £3 million ourselves. When you look at the expenditure per capita, Somerset's current expenditure is 35–40% below the aggregate of our neighbouring councils. So yes, Somerset's budget is under pressure, but the allocation to buses is disproportionately low in Somerset. And so we need to keep on campaigning with the party in power in Somerset and with everybody else to try and get a change in attitude to that refusal to spend more money on buses when they've just said to the government there needs to be another £165 million spent on buses in Somerset to improve them. So as local representatives, as you are, you might be county councillors, you might be district councillors, you might be parish councillors, you might be user groups, but you've kindly agreed to also be local representatives. We have sent out a template to everyone who's agreed to be a local representative, just asking for an update on what's happening in your area, what the 3 major improvements you would like to see made within your immediate area, whether bus stops and bus shelters, and I'll come back to this topic, need improvement, any other thoughts? It's just a way of us getting a database, and then we'll come back and talk to you some more. We would like you to encourage the use of your existing local buses. If you had the time, it could be quite useful to put a current bus timetable up on your bus stop, because undoubtedly every bus stop in Mendip and throughout Somerset either has no bus timetable, or even worse, it has an out-of-date bus timetable. So if somebody goes along and sees a timetable, it isn't accurate. It's almost certain to be out of date. There's possibly one exception, which is Fairsaver, which is a bus operator in the northeast. They are a remarkable operator in terms of ensuring that they always have up-to-date timetables for their bus services. But most of the bus timetables, 99% of bus timetables, if they are up in Mendip, are inaccurate. Another thing you can do, particularly as councillors, local councillors, is look at planning applications and the transport plan that has to go with any large application. There is Section 106 or SIL money, and that can go towards helping introduce, improve bus services. And we would urge you to look at that and take advice from policy officers at Somerset, or, well, particularly at Somerset, but also at Mendip, to get guidance on what you can do. And we have to say that Mendip possibly has some of the most unloved bus shelters I've seen anywhere. Give you one or two examples. This was one in Wells. Not only is it dirty, it's got a smashed pane. I mean, it is not inviting. Graffiti on one in Frome, and the most important bus shelter, this is one very coaches also use as well as the end of the D2 route, is in a shocking state. This is one in Shepton Mallet, again, a smashed panel. If you go over the border, if you go to Bath and go into Wecker, you'll see very well maintained bus shelters. If you go down to South Somerset, you'll see very well maintained bus shelters. Bus shelters in Mendip are, if not uniquely bad, they are exceptionally bad. And it seems to have been a responsibility which has fallen between the district council, the parish council, and they're just not cared for. And they are in desperate need of some TLC, as well as current bus timetables. And we can campaign for better funding of your buses. Many of you, perhaps most of you, are active in local parties across Somerset of whatever persuasion. We think that this is something we would urge you to take up with the parties that you support. We have an operational date for the Somerset Enhanced Partnership of April the 1st. We know that already we're beginning to see bus cuts being made in January because of the lack of funding from the bus support grant, not adequate funding, because there was the assumption that greater use of buses would be made. And so we're seeing bus service cuts in January, but this government bus support grant actually ends at the end of March. And there is a very real fear that this grant isn't going to be extended. And if it isn't extended, there will be the prospect of very major cuts to long established, previously commercially viable bus services. And that's going to upset a lot of people if that happens. And it will happen if it is happening, if the government doesn't fund it, if local authorities don't increase their funding of buses which previously didn't require funding, but because of the reduced passenger numbers will need funding, that's going to have consequences, because 1 month later, we're going to be going to the polls in Somerset for the unitary authority, and also for a lot of local parish elections. And that unitary authority is going to then be the organisation which will take the new unitary body from 2023 forward. So who gets elected in May 2022 is going to be very significant. And if we see a lot of bus cuts during April, that will inevitably translate, I would imagine, to the ballot box. So that's the background on Somerset Bus Partnership. It's an update. So enough words from me, too many words perhaps from me. Are there further points? David Redwell's got his hand up first. He's always first. David, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, just to bring you up to date, I mean, everybody in this room tonight, or this virtual, I should say, needs to write to their MPs, because the bus operator grant is £226.5 million until the end of April. And that's what First Group and Fairsaver and Libra and all the other operators in the county, First Group across the whole county, are running the services on. There's no commercial case for any bus, not even in Bristol tonight is there a commercial case for a bus. Every bus is being subsidised by the Department for Transport, Somerset County Council, Wiltshire Council, or the West Midlands Combined Authority in North Somerset. So we're extremely worried about this. And Vera Hobhouse, the Bath MP, also in Somerset, of course, has taken up the case with Baroness Vera, the buses minister, and has pointed out that if we don't get extra money into that COVID-19 bus operator support grants, then come after Christmas, First Group and all the other operators will have to sit down and start to deregister. That means remove services, Peter pointed out, that they're running now, because there simply won't be the money to run them. So it's a very serious situation. Now, we might get on then until April when we'll have more money from government, but gap filling is very difficult. And what the government needs to keep going is funding the services. So I would ask you to write to David Heapy, James Heapy, write to Liam Fox, write to all the David Warburton, all the Somerset MPs, including the ones in the north of the county as well. Jacob Rees-Moggs, another important Somerset character. And if there's people who are on the call tonight or in any of the parishes that he covers, then we need to get him on board as well. But it's very, very important that we get representations in the House of Commons and the House of Lords. It's more important there than probably getting representations in Taunton or at Temple Meads where Wecker's based, or in West Supermere Town Hall where North Somerset's based. So I think that's very, very important. What Somerset has done is join in with Devon and Plymouth and Torbay and Cornwall to make the case for peninsular funding. And that's quite important to make the joined up case across the southwest, because if you look at the north don't speak as Lancashire. They don't speak as Durham. They don't speak as Greater Manchester. They speak as the north. They come together very much as Transport for the North and the Northern Authorities. And that's really what we've got to do in this area. We've got to come together, get all the Conservative MPs, the limited Labour ones, the very limited Liberal ones, and get them all talking to the government about the importance of funding public transport and buses. Because that's where we are at the moment. I want to build a better bus network. I want to make sure that the buses that Dan Norris provides, and I should go back and tell him this tomorrow, provides between Wales and Shepton, Mallet and Bath. He needs to look at that with John Woodman to see whether or not there's enough good service there, because basically it's a jointly funded arrangement between the two authorities. But we really have got to make a political case. And I'm not sure writing to David Fothergill is going to get us very far, or getting a bun fight over a county council election is also going to get us very far, because actually most of the money is coming from central government. And that is also the case. If Marvin Rees, the Mayor of Bristol, was on this call tonight, would tell you is the case in the city. He's very struggling to provide. Give an example of where things are difficult, and Lucy Travers would know this. We run twice a day buses now between Bath and Bristol via Bitton and Kelston. Kelston's another little Somerset village in North East Somerset. That used to be an hourly service. That used to run 18 hours a day. It now runs 2 buses in each direction. So if that's in an urban area, you can see the difficulties we have in the more urban rural area of the Mendips. So we
David,
really must work hard. And that was my point, really. It's just MPs, members of the House of Lords, and please Noble, Jacob Rees-Mogg, and any other powerful character. Rebecca Powell's another one, to make sure that the case for buses in Somerset and across the region are put together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Michael Gay? Or is it Andrea who's got her hand up? You're muted at the moment. Michael?
Yes, it's
Andrea.
me. I'll put a question in the chat. We have some county councillors present in this meeting. Perhaps they could give us their advice on the best way to influence Mr. Fothergill's approach to bus funding, because I don't think it's going to be an adequate response to wait and see what the unitary authority, what their approach is to bus funding. So I think, I take the point that it might be worth contacting MPs, but I've had very little success contacting my MP or even my county councillor, actually. So perhaps, but the question is to the county councillors, what is the best way to influence the current county council's approach to bus funding?
Philip, I think you might be the only county councillor on the and whilst we don't expect
I was waiting for that.
I do apologise. Go ahead.
As you know, Peter, I have been on the scrutiny board on this, and we're backing it as best we can. The finances at county are not all what they're difficult, like they are everywhere else. A figure that always comes to mind is 73% of the total budget in Somerset goes on children and social services. That's a massive amount of money, a big budget, and to get the other 27% cover everything else is hard work. Yeah. But I do take Andrea's point. You know that I am fighting for this, so you've seen me in action, so I'm doing my best.
I just want to endorse that. I mean, I didn't know Philip that well, but I've got to know him through bus campaigning, and he's campaigned, he's supported our meetings, he's supported as a scrutiny board and elsewhere. He's a real bus campaigner. There is no question of that. John Harvey.
I just had a question really about what impact the change to unitary authority is having on this, if any. I know you mentioned the parish council in the context of bus shelters. You know, we had roadworks on the main road, and a lorry decided to do a 3-point turn and creamed the local bus shelter. And we know exactly who to ask and say, look, there's no glass in there. And they said, yep, there's no glass in there, but we've got no money. It isn't a parish council responsibility. We know that it's where the responsibility lies, but the answer keeps coming back. Actually, there's so much confusion about unitary authority and who does what, and where the powers are going to be vested, and what's going to be parish council and what's going to be at a higher level, that they're kind of frozen. And I wondered, is that affecting this as well? Is there a kind of a freeze while that whole organizational change takes place?
I will give you my view. The county council at the moment isn't responsible, as I understand it, for bus shelters. Depends on the individual bus shelter. Some are owned by the district council and some are owned by town councils. And neither.
So not just bus shelters, but I mean that's the whole concept context of buses. I'm just concerned, obviously, that whatever we say here, if the answer is wait till unitary has been resolved, it'll be years.
I mean, it's interesting that the Wells bus station, we're seeing action there now in terms of long overdue improvements, whereas the Taunton bus station, it would seem that the resolution for that is going to lie in the hands of the Unitary Authority. The Unitary Authority will take over the responsibility for bus infrastructure, whereas at the moment, much of it is in the hands of district councils. And I think one of the problems is that it lies with different levels of local government, to the extent that none of them are performing the task very satisfactorily. But it isn't an adequate excuse to say we have to wait for the Unitary. The Unitary is probably not going to be any more generously funded, not significantly so, than the current system of district and county councils. It's the lack of will, and the lack of will can probably be best demonstrated by looking at Mendip bus sites, and then looking at South Somerset, where the district council there has taken a much more positive approach, and they are well maintained. In Mendip, they're not well maintained. So I think it's something to take up with district councillors who, and I note that one has got her hand up, so I will pose the question at her shortly. But I just don't think bus infrastructure is very high up on the priority list. Barbie, having set you up for that.
Well, I'm not going to try and answer your question, Peter. I have a question of my own. So I've got a question about money, obviously, is the biggie here. So this sort of, assertion at the beginning about the Prime Minister's commitment to buses, the strategy, bus back better, government commitment to buses, then, but we have to apply for this 165 million. And I don't understand where all of this commitment sits with this idea that funding's going to fall off a cliff. So it's kind of, you're well embedded in all of this, Peter, but I'm not. And I don't see how this is joined up, really, that on the one hand, Boris has been playing with buses since he was a child, and what he wants more than anything else is a bus service for us all. But so, that nonetheless, there doesn't seem to be a joined up funding strategy in any shape or form. And I wondered if there's anybody here, perhaps you, Peter, but anybody else here who can kind of see the sense of this sort of promise on the one hand, but the lack on the other. And this sort of sense that somehow different local authorities have to make ends meet when actually constantly they have suffering funding cuts, and so, Phil says, completely get what Phil's saying about, where they need their priorities with spending, children's services, those kinds of things. But basically, it is about who's responsible for deciding where the money goes. And if a commitment is made and the money doesn't follow it, then I don't believe in the commitment. So I'm kind of making a statement, but I'm also asking if there's anybody else here who can answer the question about how this happens without the joined up notion to, strategy to money.
Brian,
so there I am. I've said my piece.
Brian, could you take that up?
I'm going to take it up. Sadly, Barbie, I actually think you've hit the nail on the head with this. So I've alluded to earlier my sort of wanderings with some really good people in the bus department when they were looking to work out where the Rural Bus Strategy Fund was going to come from and how the bus service improvement plan might look. but it's been framed as a gift, and it really isn't. It's a series of pilot experiments, and they're seeing what works, and nothing is ever going to work unless the basic backbone which we're building upon has funding. And at the moment, we can't see any remedy for that. The idea of the bus service improvement plan is to bring in really innovation and betterment of services. So when what we're building upon actually is dying on its heels, that's this sounds so depressing, but it's sort of set up for failure. And the encouragement to see things like, good ideas like sort of blending into core corridor services, DRT, hubs, etc., are all fantastic ideas, but the government only ever pay for ideas to see what works. They have not, as far as I can see, set up a constant stream. Now, it may be that when they see what works, they might have a stream of investment that then will come from there. But at the moment, my sympathy actually lies with these local authorities and with user groups across the country, as we have so much hope and sort of three years of a muddle, really. And you might get an idea of something, but it'll take 5 years before people realise services are there and they've been tweaked enough. And so we've really got our work cut out going onwards. And I have great concerns. The momentum and, as you say, finance will be lost. So sorry not to be more optimistic on it. I would say on the funding, if you're wanting to claw anything, if you can show that any other money like the rural services grant, you could make each one of those pounds spent worth twice what it was using bus service improvement plans, then you probably are going to tick more boxes in the DFT evaluation sheet. But that's kind of as far as I would go, unfortunately.
David.
Peter, if I could just come in as well, because
Yeah.
when we set this policy up, and I was engaged with it early on at the department, as was Bryony, we didn't assume we were going to get COVID-19. We assumed there was going to be growth in traffic on both buses and local trains. We assumed that there'd be a fare box and we'd be topping up taxpayers' money on top of the fare box. It's the fare box percentage that has now just vanished, and we are now faced with basically having to subsidise the whole thing. And that is the issue that the ministers are grappling with today and are grappling with. So the only answer is going to be this, is very clear, and I can give you this very clear from people working on the strategy in Stagecoach and First Group yesterday, and that is unless we get the subsidy checks to continue from the government, which is absolutely important, then we will take cuts. And the biggest issue tonight in the West Country is to persuade the MPs, to persuade Baroness Fear and Grant Shapps to continue that public support checks every month to the operators to provide the services that you vitally want. And then when it comes to April, we should be able to find some money on top of that, do the enhancements, and there'll be a bit more money. But it is about public money, as Bryony says. And also, I make this point, we're going to have a difficulty because the government's going to ask about match funding from local authorities, it always does. And as you rightly pointed out, compared with the West End Combined Authority or North Somerset or Devon or Plymouth or Torbay or Cornwall or Dorset, although Dorset's below Somerset, so we'll be truthful there, but Wiltshire, there is subsidies going in, the subsidies in Swindon this evening going in. So they'll look at carefully about Somerset subsidies. So that is your issue for the Unitary Council, is about making sure that they do up their subsidies. And as a person who put all those bus shelters in with Kate Mack and John Gillam, some names of the past that Councillor Ham would know, he was involved as well. It saddens me to think that there's a contract on every one of those bus shelters with Mendip Council, and we really do need to get Mendip to hand those over in a fit straight to Unitary Somerset. But please, these guys, it's about revenue support. And when we were covering it during COVID, just to give an idea what was being spent, it was £25.3 million a week on bus subsidy in England. We're still spending £17 million a day keeping your local trains running between Weymouth and Bristol. And there's only 8 of them a day. So that's part of the English network. But, you know, that's where we are. So please just push the subsidies, get the MPs, get members of the House of Lords, just say we need to keep bus subsidies and improve what we've got. Thanks.
I think we get your message. Write your MP. Brian, did you want to come back? Or, yeah. Then we'll come to you, Michael. Yeah. Sorry.
Just very quickly, I wanted to pick up actually and let people in on a conversation we had, Peter, about bus shelters, because people are saying, look at the state of so many, there's such disparity. And so often you don't know where to complain and how to complain and where responsibility lies. And I wonder whether there's an opportunity for the Somerset Bus Partnership to look at finding a code of best practice, which you can hold up and parish councils can keep a check on. Peter and I, we've broadly discussed this, and I've spoken to a couple of operators who I think would get on board with some help on it, but probably according to existing marketing. And we need to be prescribing what is needed, like flags, like what are the right chemicals to clean it with? Can you get your parish council involved? Can the parish council get the school involved? Let's get some community ownership of those bus stops. So that would be what I'd say to take away as a practical, very relatively low cost passenger enhancement.
I personally, I would endorse that as very strongly. I know a member of my family was busily cleaning a bus shelter only the other day. Andrea, or is it Michael, who's got their hand up? And I think
it's me this time.
Right.
We've had a go each. I'd just like to make a few plain statements and a question. The few plain statements are, I don't accept that there is any excuse why Somerset should be any more challenged than any other rural county. For a minute, you mentioned the ballot box, and that's what the ballot box is for. I'd be delighted if people had the bus issue in their mind when they go to the ballot box. I think that we could put up a bus timetable around here. It would be the same one, and it would always be correct. It would be a blank sheet of paper. And I'm delighted to see a friend from Upton Noble on this call. It wouldn't be the first time that I've given a lift to people from Upton Noble walking to Sainsbury's and back down the A359, and I've begged them not to, because it's an extremely dangerous road to walk down, and it is miles and miles. And yet the problem is, Peter, that I am very willing to help with anything like this, and Phil has discussed it with me before now, and doing something is always better than doing nothing. But the fact is, contrary to your peroration at the start, I don't have any confidence that Boris intends me to have a bus or Daniel. I have no confidence that the BSIP will touch communities in my ward in the way that we want them to. And I have no confidence that the appropriate money will be handled in the appropriate way by the county council based on record to date. And I'm sure that Phil would agree with me that I have every reason to have a reservation about that. And you've mentioned Mr. Fothergill yourself, and the fact that he's not minded to help. So my challenge really is, yes, of course we will help. I think we all want to help, Peter. Maybe our challenge as part of the Somerset Bus Partnership is to think outside the box and say, what would actually make a difference? How will the people of Upton Noble and Wanstead and Whittam Friary and Truddock's Hill, how will we ever get a bus? You know, still less a bus that meets the social needs of the residents of our villages, including the young and the old and women and the vulnerable, including disabled people who need the bus service. I know that you're passionate about buses, Peter. So am I. I'm just very concerned that we need to do more than what we're talking about in order to achieve it.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks.
I would just point out that Somerset County Council has asked for £165 million. Whether we will get it, time will tell. But if we were to get that, or even a big chunk of that, one would hope that we would see dramatically improved bus services. We've now been going for an hour and a half. I'm told there's a football match that some people are wanting to watch, but I'm not a Manchester United fan, so it doesn't matter to me. Ken, your hand is up.
Yes. First of all, if we can just go back to the sorry state of Mendip's bus shelters, having looked at the ones that were shown as examples, I'm sure that the people from Rodney Stoke who use the buses would be delighted to have ones in such good condition. What we seem to have here is a leftover World War II pillbox. And, you know, you can't sit in it and see if the bus is coming or not. You know, it's not one of these nice, what should be nice metal and glass structures at all. It's breeze block, which is in sad need of attention. And I think Robin Dyes would back me up on that, hopefully. And to go a little bit further, it would be useful, I think, to go back to why the bus services across the whole nation are in such an appalling state. Back in the mid-1980s, the Thatcher-Reagan rush to deregulate absolutely everything led to bus services being deregulated, which meant that anybody who'd got a few quid in their pocket could go out and buy a bus and apply to run a bus service. It was deliberate government policy at the time to not allow bus services to be timetabled to meet rail services at the appropriate points of contact. And that, I think, you know, was the beginning of virtually the end of public transport, at least as far as buses were concerned. If you compare that with what was going on in the Netherlands at the time, you could fly into Schiphol, Amsterdam's airport, and once you were clear of customs and immigration, you could walk down to the platforms in the station below. You'd have to, during normal hours, which I think ran from 6 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night, you would have to wait not more than 15 minutes for a train heading in the direction you wanted to go. And when you got to your train destination, if you had a need to go on with a bus service, the bus would have been there waiting for you. And you know, that was my findings after 6 years of actually living in the Netherlands. And much as I hate to encourage Robin by saying what a super place the Netherlands is, you know, this should be being driven from the top, not from the bottom upwards, and not from county councils upwards. The government should be doing something about it. Even the Romans knew that 1600 to 2000 years ago.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone. I mean, clearly there are a whole range of different levels at which we can address this issue. David has repeatedly advised us or asked us, even pleaded with us to write to our MPs, and also to Dame Veer in the House of Lords. And it can only do good if we do that, and most especially about the bus service grant, which is keeping our buses running. It's absolutely vital that that should get extended beyond March 31st. Otherwise, there will be a really serious problem for our buses. We're already seeing some bus operators beginning to withdraw services in January. So at a time when there seemed to be so much hope for buses with Bus Back Better, the reality at the moment is quite disturbing, and the solution to that reality lies at a national level. It doesn't lie at a Somerset level. At the Somerset level, we have seen an extraordinarily ambitious bid, and I would urge everyone to endorse that bid and hope that they are successful, even if there might be an element of skepticism about whether they will be as successful as they've asked for. But anything that we get has to be a big step forward. But then if we can just take it back to the very local level, and that might be your local bus shelter where you have a bus service. Recognise Wanstrow, which is a village I know very, very well. My wife helped write a history of Wanstrow. But in those places where there are bus services, then as local bus representatives of the Somerset Bus Partnership, as local bus advocates, as local bus champions, we do need to do everything we possibly can to try and ensure that the information about buses locally, whether it's on parish websites, whether it's on Facebook pages, whether it's on bus stops, is as accurate and as up-to-date as possible, not only to get more people onto buses, but actually to provide the service for those people who have no option but to rely on buses. And that's the levelling up agenda of this government. A lot of people are very dependent on buses, and it's a responsibility of all of us, I think, to try and ensure that what bus services we have, the information about them is communicated as fully and as comprehensively as possible. We've got a big battle ahead of us. We have issues with whatever money we get given to ensure that it gets spent in the right way. And there is the whole issue of direct response travel, which might be a solution for many more rural areas, particularly those with no bus services. There are issues of greater frequency, whether that's for Wells and Shepton wanting 15-minute frequency, or a village like my own, which would just like to have an hourly bus service to get us to the place our villagers need to get to, which is Bath. At the moment, we don't get a bus after about 9:40 in the morning to get to Bath. So there are lots of issues, lots of local issues, and local campaigners can make a difference. So please do stick with us, please do campaign. And we will have another meeting. Probably it will be after we know what the allocation has been to Somerset, but I think we'll probably aim for a meeting in the second half of January, and we'll let you all know. But thank you very much for giving an hour and 40 minutes for your time. It's really appreciated. We maxed out at 20 people on the call. Here we are, an hour and 20 minutes on, and we still, well, we had 19, we're actually down to 18. But hopefully that indicates that it's been an interesting meeting, hopefully a constructive meeting, and thank you very, very much. Glenn Burrows, did you want to just say a last thing, or was that waving at me? Perhaps it was just waving at me. Oh no, you're coming on, Glenn. You're muted at the moment. You're muted.
I was just congratulating everyone. I turned my video off because I've got a weak connection, and I'm told that that's the way to stop myself getting cut off. But thanks for letting me come along, and thanks everybody.
Thanks. Okay.
Peter.
Yes,
Peter,
David.
Just very kindly say to everybody that the 17th of December, Midsummer Norton Town Hall, please come and have your say. with the Metro Mayor on those cross-border services, taking people from Shepton, Mallet, Wells, Glastonbury and Street, and the other villages in between where those buses start running into Baines and Bristol, as you pointed out. Please come whenever you say, because the bus service improvement plan is across 2 council areas, Weka, North Somerset and Somerset. Cheers. Thank you.
And there is an A37 consultation being done by Baines, which is looking, I believe, at bus priority lanes. So that's something else to watch out for. Thank you, David. Thank you to everyone. Hope it's been interesting. Thank you to our County Councillor, Philip Ham, for coming along. Really appreciated. To our District Councillor, Barbie Lund, for joining us, and for all the local councillors. It's amazing how much time people give to local issues, and you're really good examples of that. Thank you very much indeed, and good night to you all.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks.
Thanks for all the hard work.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Peter. Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks.